Hey everyone, I was hoping to get this video out like over a week ago, but I had audio issues. I've had probably the busiest week of work I've ever had in my entire life. I've just had no free time. But better late than never. There should still be a good 4 or 5 days of the event left by the time this video comes out. And hopefully, if anyone is still struggling, this guide can help them. Right, so I have here my deck for the raid. Unfortunately, it's pretty simple, but let's go through it and let's go through some of the variations you can have on the deck, some of the cards you can have in if you maybe don't have the cards that you see here in this video. The first one to note here is our ace monster, Zubaba Knight. You basically, for your ace, you want a monster with anti-shield, with one of these abilities here. The best monsters to have for your ace are either Zubaba Knight or V Tiger Jet. As you see, it has anti-shield. The reason being is that both of these monsters have 1,600 attack. And if you equip them with a third slot, and you have that slot as attack boost, they can then get over the raid monster that the boss sends at you. Now, in the early levels, this is not a problem. But at the later levels of the raid, the boss will send at you a 1,600 attack point raid monster. And these are the only two monsters that can get over that and break 3 shields. The boss at the later stages having 4 shields. So if you break at least 3 of them, it means on the next turn, everyone can just concentrate on attacking and doesn't have to worry about the shields. Ideally, you want to have one of these two, but if you don't, that's fine. The boss only sends that raid monster against you if if you're facing his back. So as long as you're not facing the back, this is basically a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to really need this monster. But you can get by just, if you have any monster with at least 2 anti-shield slots, you can get by just fine. And the reason why you want to have this as your ace is you always need an anti-shield monster turn 1. Because once the boss's shields are gone, they're not coming back. So you always want this anti-shield monster turn 1, and by having that as your ace, it means you do not have to worry about having multiple anti-shield monsters in your deck because you're always going to draw it turn 1. Apart from that, we basically have just a ton of boss buster monsters and some assist heal monsters. This raid has made it so that a number of cards gain the boss buster ability even if they don't have any slots. For example, these being like Blackluster Soldier, Leviathan Dragon, Celtic Guardian. There's Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, which I don't really have, but that's another good card to have in if you do. Right? First step, have as many of these cards in as possible. They are going to be the best cards in your deck. But now let's go through the list really quickly, and I can kind of show you what cards I have in and why I've had them, and potentially see any changes that you can make. So, I'll start with all the rares and everything. I basically have in almost every boss buster monster I have. I think I'm missing maybe 1. The name of the game of this raid is do as much damage to the boss as possible. You want to have in every single boss buster monster possible. I also have in Dark Resonator and Performal Hip Hippo. Now the reason why I have these on with 1 slot with the double sacrifice and 1 slot with the boss buster or the assist heal is because I am running Elemental Hero Neos and Blackluster Soldier, which I don't have all 3 slots of Neo, so it is going to require me 2 tributes at the beginning, and Blackluster Soldier just requires you 2 tributes anyway, so that's why I have those in, so that it just makes my high level monsters easier to get out. If you do not have in these cards, I would definitely not recommend having in any double sacrifice monsters because they are just too many resources to get out. You can maybe have in 1, but otherwise they are just too many resources to get out, and a lot of the time when you summon them, yeah, they're going to do a lot of damage, but they're going to leave you without resources on future turns, and that means you won't have monsters to go for the objects on later turns. Now, the other lot of monsters I have in are assist heal monsters, and that's because this boss does a lot of damage. Now, you might be wondering, hey, I don't have in any anti-object monsters. The reason for that is that the objects only go up to 1 or 2 at most. So, when it's a 2, if at least one, if both of you send at least 1 monster to it, you've got it. If it's 1, only 1 person needs to send a monster to it. There's really no reason to have anti-object monsters. unless maybe you're struggling to fill in empty slots. And I only have in 2 spells. One is Butterfly Dagger Elmer, which is Boss Buster. This card represents essentially 4,000 damage done to the boss. And Twin Swords of Flashing Light. This is because in the later levels, the boss starts to send a 7th Road Magician at you, which is 2,100 attack. And if all you have in your hand are, you know, your Boss Buster monsters, they're not going to gain any attack when attacking the anti-raid monster. So that's why I have this in. I feel like if you have in maybe 2 or 3 cards that can help deal with anti-raid monsters, mainly ones that buff up attack to get over it, so you can actually, you know, help out your allies when they're in trouble, and also, you know, if you've got an anti, you know, boss buster, and if you've got a boss buster monster that's going to do a ton of damage, you want it to get over it. You don't really want to waste a monster that just has, you know, anti-raid monster, because that monster won't end up doing a whole load of damage to the boss. So that's why I have those in. I don't have in things like Mask Brutality, for example, because it's only a buff up by 1,000. It's only going to represent 2,000 damage in total. You ideally want to kind of push to get as much out of your cards as possible. And in that respect to the raid monster, the other card I have in to deal with it is Elemental Hero Neos. Now, the reason being is Neos doesn't have Boss Buster or anything like that, but when I get him out once with 2 sacrifices, after that, he's just a 1 sacrifice 3,500 attack point monster, meaning that I can always use him to get over those raid monsters if I don't have the other relevant cards that I need to get over it. So that's why Elemental Hero Neos is in. He's definitely not necessary. If you have enough cards that can just help deal with the anti-raid monsters, I think that is good enough. And again, I have Leviathan Dragon because he gets the buff. I do have Odd Eyes Pendulum, but I only have 1 slot for him. If you do have Odd Eyes and you can unlock his final skill, then that would actually make him a very good card to put in. So if you have Odd Eyes and you can unlock this skill, which is he can be summoned without tribute, he's a very good card to get in because he immediately gets free Boss Buster skills in this raid, which will put him up to 5,500 attack. So this is definitely not the optimal deck that I'm showing you here. It's just a good idea of what to use and how to play, and maybe like the number of cards to other cards to put in. I have in 5 assist heal cards in this deck, and I feel like that is a pretty optimal number. They're used mainly to attack the objects, and then once they've destroyed the objects, they will carry on and heal you from the boss's damage. I think in all my testing so far, I think 5 has been a pretty optimal number. If you can fit in 5 assist heal monsters and then go as many Boss Buster as possible, and then fill out the rest with, you know, a couple of supports, a couple of cards to help deal with those raid monsters, I think you'll be in a good position. Now, I wanted to build a deck that didn't really have any super rares or ultra rares in, so I've kind of taken out most of them, and I've just made it this deck full of like normals and commons to hopefully to help free-to-play players build their decks. They don't have too many cards. For example, one of the cards I put in here was Go 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 Golem, which is I think one of the only Boss Buster monsters that I didn't actually have in the deck. And then I put in a little bit of support for dealing with those raid monsters, namely Rightful Magic, which can decrease the raid monster's attack by 800. And Performal Silverclaw, which again is just an anti-raid monster himself. So I've just added in a little more tech to deal with raid monsters. I've left in 2 ultras here because I'm hoping that even free-to-play players will have at least, you know, 1 or 2 ultra rares or super rares that they can use for this raid. Anyway, that has been the deck. Let's get to the raid. So this is level 14 for the raid. Now, as I mentioned in the video, you get the shields on all sides of the bosses first. And as you can see, I've actually been the person that is going to get the 1600 attack point raid monster. Now, the first turn, you only want to go after the shields. I'm actually making a mistake here on this turn. I'm actually making a mistake on this turn by sending my monsters after the shields. The reason for this is when you break the objects, it leaves the boss open, and you don't actually need to break the objects on the first turn, because you're not going to be doing much damage to the boss. You're only going to be breaking those shields. So there's really, really no point in spending resources to actually break these shields for the boss. And as you can see, my monster having 1800 attack there was what allowed it to get over the 1600 attack power monster. We all break the shields and get them down to 1, which means on the next turn, we can then just go full throttle and attack the shields.
You can't be serious. Nothing to worry about. Direct attack. Stay on your toes. Did you draw a good card?
So here I'm deciding to go for an early tribute summon with my Neos because I don't really need the assist heal this early, and as I don't have 3 slots for my Neos, I need to use 2 tributes on it at the beginning, and then after it comes back to my hand it will just be 1 tribute after that. So I'm deciding to do that now rather than put down the Needle Sunfish for this first attack on the boss.
Smart move. The monsters are moving. Oh no.
And it really is just a case of making sure that all of the objects are going to go down and everyone just attacks with their strongest monster into the boss. Now, as an added element you can do in the raid group before you go into the raid is just to say everyone, hey, just attack the object to your right. Like, be responsible to the object for your right, unless the object on the left is 2, in which case 2 players will need to send a monster to that object. There really is no need to have in any anti-object monsters in this raid duel, as the most an object will ever have is 2 points that you need to take it down. And at that point, as long as 1 player from each side attacks it with a monster, it'll be taken down. Now here the raid boss is using a ability which switches the battle position of all monsters in that lane. This ability isn't really meant to stop your monster from going to attack the object, because you can just put it into defense mode, as you'll see here, and it will be changed into attack mode. I think what this ability is mainly for is if it puts ignite on one of your monsters which is already going down there, it can then stop that monster and deal you damage. It also prevents those monsters from getting to the end and assist healing you, but fortunately it doesn't really prevent the monsters from, as long as you have a monster in your hand, it doesn't really prevent you from destroying those objects. So here you can see I use Needle Sunfish as well, because it will, it would have been it would buff itself up and do more damage than Neos. And you can see there, the boss does a lot of damage at this level. Again, putting down my monster because it rather than summoning Neos, because my monster will go up above what Neos can go up. And as you can see, the boss has also summoned a stronger raid monster for the person behind him now. And as you can see, the person opposite the boss has been forced to defend against this raid monster, because a lot of the time your normal boss buster monsters are not going to be able to get over 2,100 attack. And especially at this point now, the boss has also done an ability which reduces all of our monsters by 500 attack and defense. So sometimes this raid monster can be difficult to deal with. But even at level 14 of the raid, it is okay if you are able to just defend it for a turn and then just carry on attacking the turn after that. Obviously, as I mentioned in the deck discussion, if you do have a few methods to actually get past this raid boss, or even help your allies with the raid boss, this can work out very, very well, and everyone can just sort of keep up the attack. I mean, honestly, this boss really doesn't have too many really powerful or annoying skills like some of the other raid bosses that have had. But it is a boss where you need to just keep on doing as much damage as you can to it. The only real annoyances this boss uses are probably pretty much really the raid monsters it summons against you.
I channel the power of my terrestrial monster to activate road magic tectonic shift. Put your brains to the test.
And yeah, the reason why I sacrificed for Neos there, my assist heal monster, is I saw that we already had enough assist heal coming in that I didn't really need my assist heal monster to sort of restore life points that wouldn't be restored.
No, not Seventh Road. I'm healed up. You dropped your guard. Smart move. Direct attack. Stay on your toes. I'm summoning a monster. I'm not holding back. Did you draw a good card? It's the main phase of the 6th turn. It's aiming for you. Keep your guard up.
Now I'm using the double sacrifice feature of my Dark Resonator
Summoned.
to put out Neos because the monster he summoned is stronger than both my Boss Buster monsters. If you are able to, if you do have enough copies of these monsters to be able to have enough slots to have all 3 Boss Busters and an attack up, that would actually very much help in this raid, but I think that's going to be very difficult for most people to achieve.
Monster to activate road magic explosion. I channel the power of my aquatic monster to activate road magic blowback. Put your brains to the test.
But that's one of the good things about having Neos in the deck is as long as you draw it, you have it in your hand, and it's at the point where you need one sacrifice to get it out. Then you don't really need to worry too much about the anti-raid monsters because you're always going to be able to get over them with Neos. Though sometimes you do have to sacrifice some damage to actually do this because you're not able to summon your normal raid monster. That's where spell cards like, the anti-raid monster spell or just attack buffs can help out in these situations. Alright, so we're turn 7 now. He's only got a little bit of health left before he gets stunned. At this point, you don't need to worry about objects or life points or anything like that, because if you can stun him this turn, if you can get to that health threshold this turn, he will become stunned, and all the objects will be destroyed, all raid monsters will be destroyed, and he won't hit your life points at the end of this turn.
We're moving to the battle phase. I channel the power of my aquatic monster to activate road magic blowback. I channel the power of my cyclonic monster to activate road magic tempest. Put your brains to the test. The monsters are moving. Ready for this? I activate my skill. Nothing to worry about. I'm healed up. Smart move. You dropped your guard.
And there we go. We've cleared that health threshold.
That's a shocker.
He gets stunned, and then it's just going in for the final blow. Though it is key to realise he does still have 18,000 health at this point. Fortunately, you do draw 2 cards, so it is very likely you're on the home clear at this point. But I have been in situations where me and my teammates have not been able to get down that like 20-odd thousand health he might have at the end. This time, though, we definitely are.
We're moving to the battle phase. Put your brains to the test.
And all we need to do is summon our monsters, and the boss is going down. So, there you have it, right? Definitely have an anti-shield monster as your ace monster. Then have a good amount of boss buster and assist heal. And realistically, you're all good. Obviously, tech in some cards that you need to tech in, and then it's really just up to you at that point to determine what cards you think are going to help you, what cards you think aren't. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you found the video helpful, and I will see you on the ladder.